name is Cassandra Kelly, and I work in the Southern region. I'm actually located in San Diego, and my background is in education technology. I worked as an elementary teacher for 7 years. I taught mostly in upper grades, although I have some experience in preschool. And when I was just beginning my teaching experience, our school was being retrofitted, which was when they were getting all new computers and laptop carts, and it was kind of a big deal at the time. Even though technology's been around for a while, it was a big deal for our school. We were a little bit behind to have the technology. And so my role ended up being as a technology coordinator for the school, where I was giving the teachers a lot of support, providing professional development, getting them comfortable with how to use the technology with the students. And then that kind of motivated me to go back to school for my master's degree in technology. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about how technology can be used in education as a teaching tool, which I feel like today's students all are exposed to technology in some way, but thinking about how to leverage it in an online space and thinking about how to make it an educational tool is a different experience altogether than just playing with technology, on your phone or on your other devices. So that was my focus. And then I ended up going back to school recently in the past 4 years. And I just finished my doctorate in learning technologies. So it just is really exciting to see that it's very relevant, especially with this whole pandemic situation and schools shutting down, and we're all forced to do a lot more in the online space. And so I kind of wanted to have a chance to offer some PD for student teachers that are going to be supporting mentor teachers. We're all over the place with schools that are online right now and schools that are doing more asynchronous teaching and providing resources to students, but not necessarily having live sessions. And then we have schools that are just printing out packets and resources for kids, and a lot of parents taking over. So it's a really crazy time. And I think it's actually really lucky in the sense for you that you will get a lot of experience with this whole online platform between being part of the Cal State Teach program and also with getting to support some of the mentor teachers and participate in the online world. So I think that'll be a huge, valuable experience that you'll be able to share when you're interviewing for positions. And I'm sure the way school looks is going to continue to evolve and change, and we might be doing a lot more with flipped classrooms. And so hopefully this today's session is relevant to you. And I do have several others. Each week I'll have one. I'm alternating between Thursday evenings and Saturday daytime. So hopefully one of the options will work for you. And I do plan to record them. So if you're not able to attend, you can reach out to myself and copy your faculty, whoever you're assigned to, on the email. And I can provide the resources. And then you'll have to follow up with your faculty if there's a follow-up activity, so that we can verify that you've earned the CE hours, because it's a little tricky if you're not in the live session. We do have activities that you'll do in the live sessions and an attendance form. So that's just important that you follow up with each of us, and that way you get your credit, because some of you don't even have a school that you're in right now, and this is just one of your opportunities to earn those hours. So this beginning of the session, this one's called Zoom and Google Classroom as Online Teaching Tools. And the reason that I selected these tools to talk about is because I'm finding that most schools are using Zoom, or part of Google Classroom now is the Google Meet feature, where you can connect like we are right now. So we'll talk about kind of the difference between the two and the options between those, and thinking about it all from a teacher's perspective. And then if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. It's kind of tricky when it's just me to be able to monitor the chat. So if I miss a question, feel free to jump in on your microphone at any point. I will have a time at the very end for questions as well, but my goal is for this to have some hands-on pieces where we'll do things together. And I do recognize that some of you might already have experience in some of these spaces, and that's okay. Maybe you can challenge yourself and try something outside of your comfort zone with them, or maybe you can take on a role as a leader and help some of the others who might be new. So I'm kind of hoping that we can work together and make this a little bit more collaborative than me just talking the whole time. And that's the goals. The next slide in the presentation is just where you can find me on Twitter or email. So if you want to get in touch, you'll have access to this presentation. And an overview of our agenda. I think it's really important when we're having any type of meeting, whether it's virtual or in person, that everybody knows what to expect. I think that helps to have an overview of what the different topics are that we'll be talking about and kind of what the pacing will look like. So I did a PD in the spring semester, and some of you might have attended. And that session, I talked a lot just about flipping your classroom in general and using online spaces for teaching. So there was some discussion about Zoom and Google Classroom, but we didn't go into great depth. So the very first slides, we're going to just kind of review what the online learning environment is and who the participants are. And then we're going to dive deeper into Zoom and Google Classroom. So for Zoom, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the concerns with security. What are ways that you might use it actually for setting up a virtual classroom? And then I have some resources and examples to share with you. And then we'll talk a little bit about some teacher strategies that you might try. And then for Google Classroom, we'll talk a little bit about some of the benefits of Google Classroom. And we'll look at it from a student's perspective. So I've designed a mock Google Classroom space for you to join and take a look at kind of what some of the activities I posted and how it was set up. And then the end goal is for you to create your own Google Classroom and to share that with the group, or at least with myself, so that you can show me kind of some of the tools you played with and get those CE hours. And then I have some resources for you. And at the conclusion, we'll see, hopefully there'll be some time to address if there's any questions that we don't get to throughout the presentation. So moving along, this first slide is all about the online learning environment. So we know that there's some parallels with the traditional classroom environment, and then there's some things that are different. So first of all, one of the biggest differences in the center is that we have the asynchronous and synchronous options for teaching. And if you're working with young children, and even honestly with adults, we know that there's only so much time we can actually sit and focus before our brain starts to get overwhelmed with information. And so that's why it's really important in the online space that we break up things into chunks and maybe have options where we are live and discussing information, and then options where we present some information or some activities for students to do as a follow-up, and then we connect again in another learning experience. So both of them are important, and they both should be connected. And it's not just about giving them, like basically a digital worksheet or something. It's about making some meaningful activities where they can collaborate both with you as the teacher and also with some of the other students. So that's a really big difference, is that it's almost like there's two separate spaces, because there's the space where they are on their own doing things, where they don't have you there for support in real time. And then there's the space where you are actually there to answer questions. And that's what's so important as well about being available in the online space, is that we want to have a really quick turnaround time with feedback and answering questions, because it's relevant to students, and because if we wait too long, then they will move on and we will lose that learning opportunity. Some other aspects too of the learning environment is we know that it's very flexible. We don't always have students who have access, so we have to really understand that they can't all necessarily connect in the same way. We have students who are sharing devices with different siblings, and we have family members who are also working from home at this point while sharing devices. So we really have to be flexible, and that means we have to give them a variety of things that they can do to adjust for their different circumstances. even though we're in this online capacity and sometimes we can think of technology as being engaging, it's also really easy to lose their focus if we don't find ways to make it really interactive. So engaging and interactive kind of go together because we want to give them opportunities to be able to talk with one another and to be able to create something and to actually not just be a passive learner sitting there. So that's really important that we think about those pieces. And part of that is collaboration. The other part of it is just bringing in other websites and applications so that we can make it more fun. There's a variety of tools, and sometimes it's better to start with one at a time, get your comfort level, get the students comfortable with it, and then to introduce more tools. It really also depends on the age group of the students you're working with because, sometimes it's better to keep it more simple. And sometimes when they're a little bit older, they're very savvy and they want to explore new tools, and you can give them those opportunities. The last piece is just that technology is very mobile now. And so we know that some of our students might be connecting through mobile devices and others might be on a computer. And that's the beauty of the online learning environment, is that we can actually teach from anywhere and make it very accessible. So that's just kind of capping up what the online learning environment looks like, and then who are the participants. So we have our teachers, which is the role that you're in, and our role is to engage the learners, to get them really excited about whatever it is we're doing, to build a learning community with them and make them feel like they're actively participating. We want to still provide that scaffolded instruction. And that's important because kids can just go on and access information. It's, there's endless references and resources available to them, but you're still the teacher and you still have the ability to help them understand things and to provide guided practice. So scaffolding is really key, and you'll hear that term a lot throughout teaching because it's important that you're basically kind of gradually releasing the types of instruction that you offer and giving them opportunities to be successful on their own, but you're still there to offer support. The next bullet about continuous support is that, you're there for them in a variety of ways. So you can be there for them by emailing them, you can reach out to them and offer them words of encouragement, you can share other resources with them, and you're just there to be a listening ear. We talked about the relevant feedback and then being very timely, because we know that students expect instant feedback and instant responses, and that's why they really like games and very interactive pieces of technology, because they find out really quickly how they performed, and they want to know that. They want to know how they're doing, and they want to feel good about it. The other really exciting piece about using the online space is that we have the ability to really differentiate and support our students, because there's so many different tools out there, and we can actually use universal design for learning by incorporating things that meet their different learning modalities. So for example, if we want to have videos and have some audio clips and things that will support their learning and their understanding besides reading something, we can have simulations and use some virtual reality and other elements of technology that can make something come to life. And that's really the power of the technology, is when we find ways to use those tools to support each of our individual students. The other big important piece is giving the students choices, because we don't all like to learn the same way. We don't all like to show our learning the same way. We want to have a chance to do what we're excited about, what we're comfortable with, and that's okay. And so what's really amazing about the technology is we can give them different ways, different options that they can show their learning. So we could say, show me with an iMovie, or create a Flipgrid, where you talk about, how you feel and respond to your classmates. Maybe they make a Google Slides presentation, or perhaps they use a little whiteboard and they draw things if they're very, into being artistic. But they don't all have to show their learning the same way, and that's key. So giving them choices, and we'll talk a little bit about how Google Classroom has features where you can assign things to specific students. So they don't all have to have the same type of assignment, and you can also have them give you different types of assessments where they follow up with a different type of activity. And the last piece that's just important for us as teachers is we want to be willing to explore new tools because we know that the kids are really excited about it. And sometimes we're hesitant, and you might see with your mentor teacher that they get a little bit scared about some of the new tools, and they don't want to try too many things at once, and that's okay. But as long as we're willing to try them, there can be a lot of really great benefits. And I would recommend that you look on Twitter and try to follow some of these educators who are like the pioneers of technology, because they're doing amazing things. And being able to see how other educators are actually using the tools can be really helpful and encouraging for you. So I follow so many people. One of the people I follow is a kindergarten teacher who works with students who don't really speak English, and he does a lot to support them and bring them into his space with the online learning. And I think that's really important because a lot of people in kindergarten think, wow, I don't know if the kids can handle this technology, and they're a little bit hesitant. And it's nice to see an actual example of somebody doing that. That's really powerful. So on the other side, looking at our learners, we know that our learners are kind of split down the middle. Typically, we have some that are excited to be in this online space that maybe are not as into going to school, but now their voice is coming out as they can participate in the online space. And then we have others who are, not motivated. They feel like they are just having to sit still and look at this computer screen, and it's not as exciting as going to the classroom. And so you have a mix. And that's why, again, that engagement is key, and also making it interactive and thinking about what the students enjoy is really helpful. So they really want to be involved. They want to get that feedback right away, and they're extremely social. And they really like to do like chatting types of activities. And there's a lot of platforms where they kind of mimic social media. Like there's Edmodo, for example, is a space that looks kind of like a Facebook or a Twitter feed. And the kids love it. And that's because they want to feel like they're part of a community and they have the option to share things with each other. And so that's a big piece that we want to include, whether it's a synchronous session or an asynchronous session, that we give them those opportunities to talk to one another and be a part of that community. And then just aligning with the power of choice, we know that the kids really enjoy expressing themselves and being creative. And so that's why it's so much fun that we can give them tons of tools and allow them to kind of pick and choose what works best for them. So they're excited, they're our learners, and we want to make sure that we're considering all these things when we plan our lessons and we meet with them for instruction. So the first piece, we're going to talk about Zoom as a teaching tool. And I'm sure you've heard that there's been some controversy. So Zoom initially was a great tool because it was free and you didn't have to have the application. You just needed a link to the meeting room. And that was like a big feature that people were really excited about. However, in this time that everybody's been going online, we've had issues where people are what you hear as Zoom bombing, and they're joining sessions without permission, and they're hacking into the screens and placing inappropriate content on the screens. And so now there's a lot of schools that are hesitant to use Zoom and have made a lot of strict rules about not recording in Zoom, not having students on camera in Zoom. And then some of them have even stopped using Zoom altogether. So it's important that you're aware of what's happening, and that, one of the biggest things is that there are settings that you want to be aware of that you can change to make it secure. When you have that set up, though, there's a lot of amazing things that you can do because it connects you quickly, and you're able to do a lot with sharing some of the features, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those. So on this first slide, launching your virtual classroom, I want you to look to the right. This is an example that one of my colleagues shared with me. Her children are school age, and the teacher of one of her children provided this. And this was actually something that they reinforced from the very beginning. And I think it's so important because with little kids, it's hard sometimes to imagine, like, what does it look like when we all connect in a session like this, where the kids can all be talking over one another, they can be easily distracted. And so what this teacher has done is basically set some norms, and those norms allow the students to really know kind of what the expectation is for when they should be speaking and when they interact and when they're listening. And so you could create something like this very easily with your own rules. You can probably Google it and find other examples. This one was actually designed for, I think he's in kindergarten, the student. So there's a lot of visuals, and it's just helpful because the kids are learning that even though they're not in the classroom, it's still like a classroom where they have to be respectful and that they have to give other people a chance to speak, and they have to listen to when the teacher is speaking. So I think that's one of the most important things when you're first introducing Zoom to the kids, is that you establish kind of what are the rules and expectations. The other piece is making sure that you give them an overview of how to use Zoom. And so I do have on my one of my follow-up slides, there's some great handouts and resources that are already created that you can share with students, so they know, how do I actually log in? If I'm on a mobile device or if I'm on a computer, what are the differences? And so that's another piece of kind of just introducing this tool. So let's talk about security. I have in this presentation a hyperlink to a document. I'm not sure, is the document showing up on your screen? Because I did click it, but it opened up a new window.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. So Zoom has put together some resources about, making sure your classroom is locked. And one of the first things you want to do, obviously, is to make sure that the kids can't share the screen unless you allow it. So in your settings, you're able to actually update it to where you can only make someone a co-host or a host so that they can share. And that's really important because that was one of the problems where people were coming in and they were just taking over what was on the screen. The other thing is you can set your meeting so that you have a password, which is really important to have that password, so that you don't give it out until it's time or until you know the correct people are joining the meeting. You can also, there's a feature where you can have give permission as each person signs up to come into the classroom. It can be tricky. Like right now we have 93 people on the call, so you almost need a co-host or someone else who's helping to facilitate the learning experience, because with a lot of people, then you have to double check and make sure that the people's names match with who's supposed to be there. With kids, they can log in with different names. So one of the rules that a lot of teachers are mentioning is, making sure that the kids actually use their real name. And a lot of times they'll have them just put like their first initial or just their first name and not their last name for security purposes. So that's something important. Another thing with kids that you can think about is having them create like an avatar or some sort of other image that they have instead of their real pictures. So this is a hyperlinked document that you have access to. So there's different ways, again, to lock the chat, to get rid of somebody who is being inappropriate, and making sure people are actually registered and able to log in. So this is just a really important thing that we didn't have to think about previously that's become extremely important now. So I would definitely recommend that you look through this. And keep in mind that when you're in Zoom, the settings that you're changing for this are actually through the web browser and they're not through the app. So if I open another tab here and go to my Zoom account, let's see here. I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So you have to sign in. Okay, so I have lots of meetings scheduled here. So if I go here to my settings, and you can go to your meeting settings. So again, this is where you can decide if you would like to have a password that's set up or not. So you should take a look at, if you don't have an account, you should be able to get a free account with calstateteach.net. That's, I believe you have access to the professional account. And if you don't, they're doing like a special thing right now for educators to give you, because normally the free account only gives you a set limit of how long you can speak. I think it's like 40 minutes or something like that. So you want to have the educator account so you don't get locked out of meetings. So here's kind of where you can go to change some of those settings. You can mute people so that you can control who has their mic on and not. Lots of different options here. Here's the co-host piece. So make sure that you're aware of just that there's this issue going on with the Zoom bombing, and that you want to have some really secure settings in place so that you don't have any issues with people coming that shouldn't be part of the meeting. I'm going to go back. Some other fun things is just because we're in this virtual space, you can have, make it a little bit more engaging. So applying a virtual background is fun. You can see I'm in my classroom right now, right? Even though schools aren't even open. So to apply the virtual background, I'm going to see if I can share my screen and you can play with it too. You can actually upload your own images, or there's a few that are already available. This link will take you to a handout that kind of walks you through it. But in Zoom, you go to your preferences. So I'm going to see if I can share. So if you go to your settings, and it does matter what type of computer you have with the virtual backgrounds. Sometimes if it's like an older computer, it doesn't work quite well, and it's not perfect. In the past, you had to have a green screen. So sometimes like my head will disappear if I go back too far. But you can kind of play around. You can pretend you're in space. I have some fun ones. I have my very studious library, which makes it look like I'm really working hard. I have another classroom. This one almost looks like an upper grade classroom. So you can actually click the little plus button and add your own images. So you could create something. I've seen people in meetings that are at the Harry Potter castles. I've seen people who are at the pyramids in Egypt, and there's a lot of fun things you could upload. So play around with that and see if you can add a background. I want to look and see if people have their cameras on, where they're going. Looks like a lot of cameras are off, which is fine. But this is a fun way that you can make it exciting for the kids. And you could have a different background each time, and you could say to them, hey, look where I'm at today, and just kind of get them, really excited to be there. And you can even put like little video clips, like this one actually has where it moves around. I love the beach one. That one's fun too. So I'm going to go back to my classroom space. This is also where you have some of the other features about like when you're sharing screens and if you're recording to your computer or the cloud. So this is where you can get some of those general features, but then the security settings, like I said, are actually through the website. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back. I do see some questions in the chat. There will be a link to the presentation, and there will be an opportunity to share you'll have an attendance that you'll do, and the attendance has a piece that you'll have a follow-up with your Google space, and that will be where you will get your credit. So some people were asking about that. So I hope that addresses that. And thank you for some of you put the link again for the presentation. All right, I'm going to go back to the student resources example. This is one thing about Zoom too, is you do sometimes have to toggle a little bit back and forth between screens. Okay, so I'm on my student resources slide. Can you see that?
Yep.
Thank you. So this was just from one of the teachers that I follow is a techie teacher. They have a website, Techie Teachers or something like that. This was some handouts that were already created. They have some for different types of devices. This was just the iPad ones that I thought was helpful because it has the visuals and kind of walks you through everything. So this is what you could share with the kids, getting them comfortable with it. At the bottom here is the hyperlink that takes you to this page where these came from. And it's really nice. She's got it set up where you can copy it into a Google Sheets or a Google Drive so that you can have it and share it in Google Classroom. She also has just a PDF handout. I also just wanted to talk a little bit about how the kids sometimes forget how to mute and unmute. So that's something that comes up. Some of my student teachers have had to just kind of be patient and say, hey, I noticed that your microphone's not on. Take a moment and see if your mic's on. And so, not making a big deal out of it, but just reminding them of when to turn it on and when to turn it off is important. And sometimes when you first start the session, just kind of asking them, how are you doing? And giving them a chance to share something. One of the teachers that I was working with was having the kids bring like a show and tell something to the class when they first would get started. And so they would come with whatever it was that they were sharing and just have a few moments to kind of just relax and feel like they were inviting somebody into their space. And I've heard of teachers having like a snack time. And so I think that's really important too, is that it's not all structured and formal, but that we just have some of those, normal relaxed experiences. And then once it's time to actually start instruction, then we talk about, now it's time to mute our microphones, and we can raise our hands, which we can actually do by pushing a button, or we can actually raise our hands. But we want to find ways that we can make sure that we are participating, but not interrupting whoever it is speaking. And then it's also beneficial if we give them chances to be the speaker and to share something so that they can take ownership of their learning too. So I have some examples because I know it's kind of sometimes more abstract to think about this. On this slide on the left, this was actually posted on our Facebook page recently. And I just thought, wow, how incredible is this teacher? So instead of using a virtual background, and this is a teacher in San Diego, this teacher actually kind of mimicked what her classroom looked like in the actual class and set up in her kitchen or her home office or something. I think it looks like an office or something in her house though. So she has like legitimate things that she uses, like her chart stand and her schedule as she has her Zoom calls. So it's really, really exciting. Because it makes it so meaningful for the kids. There's a link on the bottom that takes you to the little article about this teacher. But you don't have to have that type of background either. So this is somebody who's going above and beyond, and wow, like what a difference it makes with their students. I've also seen some other teachers who, they might have some space outside of their house that they go, and they make it more like they're out in the sunshine, and it's more interactive in that way. And the kids get to learn a little bit more about them and their personal life. They get to kind of feel like they're outside with the teacher, and they do some exercises together. So there's some really great opportunities to kind of make this something different than the traditional classroom. I'm not sure about, the processor. I see a comment in the chat, and I think that must be a big piece of it, is the type of processor you have for the virtual background. So I'm sorry if it doesn't work, but perhaps you could use like your iPad or something. I don't know if that's an option. So I have a student teacher right now who gave me permission to share this video clip. This is a video clip of him using Zoom with the students, and he is working on CalTPA. So for CalTPA Cycle 2, a big focus is education technology and assessment. And so this student teacher was trying to find a way that he could teach about math and data analysis with the kids, but he wanted it to be meaningful, and he wanted the kids to not just sit there. And so he kind of touches on some of those elements we were talking about. So I'm going to play it. Hopefully it works. I clicked the button so that you could hear it. Can you hear sound
This
right now?
Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
For surfing, is there any more surfings than that just one, Michaela?
So you can see the kids are highlighting stuff.
Yep, this
while
one.
he uses
Okay.
the screen. He's
Is there
actually
any
in
other
Seesaw,
ones?
which is an application.
Yeah. Right here.
Point to me all the ones that are left.
You see how the
Oh,
kids
I
are
didn't even see
highlighting
that one.
while
Thank
he's
you.
kind of moving the screen.
Is that it?
No. No.
Oh, there you go. Thank you very much. I think that's it for surfing. What about football, Samantha? Help me find the football ones.
Wait.
Is there any football ones left?
Yes.
Where are they? Three?
On the top.
On the
There's
top?
3.
I see one on
So
the
you can see
top.
how he's asking a lot of questions.
There's
to
one
help
by the
make it
basketball.
exciting.
One by basketball. Okay.
And one by the soccer. Yeah.
One by soccer. There we go. And then there's one for tennis and one for basketball. Do you see how this makes...
Basketball only has one.
Do you see how this kind of makes like a bar graph? Do you see how if you line them up, they kind of make like each their own bars?
Yes.
So I can kind of like take...
They like soccer more.
They like soccer more. What is Alan doing by telling me that? So he found out that they like soccer more. What is that called? What's that vocabulary
Telling you
word?
the data?
He is, Michael, so what is that called? He's explaining what he learned.
Surveys?
He's explaining what he learned.
Oh, collected information facts? And facts?
That's data.
No! Explain what you learned. Frequency
what is that
table,
called?
tally chart. Interpret.
Interpret, yeah, good job. So Alan interpreted that more people like soccer than anything else. Am I missing something for this bar graph? What did we learn in our
Kind of
last
toggles
slide
back and forth
that we
between
need
his
for a bar graph?
presentation and this
What do we need
informal
on the
assessment.
side?
Oh, the numbers.
The numbers. Does anyone remember what that's called?
The side graph?
Not the side graph. It starts with an S. Anyone can shout it out.
No, I don't know. No.
Maybe I should have used the pen.
Survey.
Not a survey.
A number line?
No, let's go back to the slide. Oh, who said that?
Gail, me. I did.
Destiny?
No, it was Sophia.
Yeah, Sophia, you're right. It is a scale. So look at here. The scale was from 0 to 10. It shows the numbers it explains how much of each category, each label. Okay? Let's analyze this data. What do people like the least? Someone just shouted out. What sport do they like? Tennis and basketball. Yeah, Robert. How many more people like football than tennis? You have to unmute your mic.
Football and tennis. Football?
Yeah, so look at football. How many people like football?
4.
4. How many people like tennis?
2 people like tennis.
So how many more people like football?
You can see how he's kind of scaffolding the instruction because he's asking them questions.
4.
Not 4. Whoever is drawing that
and giving
is
them
not
an
helping you.
opportunity to think about it.
How many more people like football than tennis? So if 4 like football, 2 like tennis, how many more is 4 than 2?
2.
2, yes. Someone saved you there. All right.
That was me.
Do we understand now how to make bar graphs, how to look at the data? Does anyone have a question?
So he was actually using Seesaw, and he was just sharing the screen while he went through and he was writing on it, but he did allow them with the screen sharing to be able to annotate, which we'll look at. So they were allowed to like highlight on the screen that he was working with, if that makes sense. So now another option is that the kids could have had access to this in Seesaw where he could have assigned it to them and they could have been doing it on their own screen, and he could have been showing kind of what somebody else was doing on their screen, or he could have modeled for it and then had them go back and do this independently or have something very similar. So Seesaw is an amazing app. I tend to see it used a lot in the lower grades more so than upper grades, because a lot of upper grades sometimes will have some more advanced things that they're doing, but it's free. There are some features on there that are free right now for people who are educators because of the pandemic, so you should sign up. And I will be doing another PD about Seesaw where you can look a little bit more closely at some of the great resources. So that's what he was using here to kind of show them about data and give them a hands-on experience. And what's amazing that he did really well is how he had asked them questions and kind of had them help as he put together the bar graph. So, you know, he could have just said, here's what a bar graph is and had, you know, a presentation, but you can see how that made it more interactive. And that's what's really fun about it. So I thought that was a great example because he's using the technology in a way that gets the students all participating and, you know, they were kind of having fun with it. He wasn't really strict about the whiteboard. You could see somebody drew on it when they weren't supposed to, but he kind of just reminded them of the expectations and he didn't make a big deal about it. So I thought that was a great example of kind of, you know, what we could do with Zoom to make it fun, make it meaningful. And so again, we want to encourage participation, which in this case, he was using the annotating feature. You can also just have the whiteboard feature, which is where we can draw on it. A caveat to using the whiteboard feature, it doesn't allow you to control if only one student at a time is using it or if multiple students, and you have to establish norms. If you're not really happy with the way that the whiteboard works in Zoom, you might want to have like a third-party website. For example, if you made a presentation in Nearpod or in Pear Deck, you can enable the whiteboard feature on one of your slides, and then it will save it for each student, and you'll have that as like an assessment piece, but it also will control so that, you know, they can't all do it at the same time on the same slide. So I'm going to go to my settings here, and when I go to share the screen, if I do the whiteboard, I'm going to show you that it just changes to a plain board, like if I had, you know, an actual dry erase whiteboard. And you should be able to draw on it. So take a moment and see if you're able to draw. And if you're on a mobile device, it sometimes is different because a mobile device, you have to click on like the dots on the bottom and to get the menu to pop up. So I see some fun stuff already. So you can see how it could become an issue if people go crazy. And that's why we would want to have established, you know, who's doing what. I can also download and save it. So there's a menu option where we can save what's on the whiteboard. So I would say as a teacher, if I was introducing this, I would let the kids have their fun. And then we would have to talk about kind of what are the expectations and, you know, take turns. And maybe we could have someone, you know, write out a math problem and try out the math problem. And that would be their turn to do the whiteboard and model for the other students. But I would not do it where people can just go crazy. On the laptop, you kind of have to hover over the top of Zoom and there should be a menu that pops up. It could be on the top of your screen or on the bottom of your screen to be able to draw on it. I also can click on the bottom, it says whiteboard, and that's how I get that menu to show. So maybe that might help some of you who are not able to access that. So I'm going to clear it again.
Can you say that again, please?
Yes. So if you kind of hover over the bottom of your screen, it could be, the menu bar could be on the bottom or the top. For me, it's on the bottom. There should be an option that says whiteboard. And sometimes if your screen's really small, you'll have 3 little dots that say more, and you have to actually find where it has whiteboard. And then there should be a toolbar that comes up where you can actually pick if you're going to use text or if you're going to draw. It's such a beautiful drawing everyone created. So I'm going to go ahead and give you one more moment to make it special. And as you can see, we can really, really have a fun time. All right, I took it off. So the other piece that I was talking about is the annotating, which is one of my favorites. The annotating piece is fun because you can annotate right on like a slide or something that you're working on. So I'm going to switch to my next slide here, which, I just wanted to show how we could do a closed reading practice. So if I'm sharing this, what is a tricky word in here that you think kids might have a hard time with as a vocabulary word? Maybe you can circle any words that you think might be challenging. So aquatic, mammals. So I'm seeing lots of stuff already. This is excellent. Think about the power of just displaying a reading passage and allowing kids to go through the closed reading model. So closed reading is, you're reading through it together. You're talking a little bit about words that might be difficult. Then you're asking some comprehension questions. You're having them underline key phrases and maybe having them figure out what the main idea is. Maybe they're looking for some supporting details, and then they're having to put it in their own words. So, so we've circled a lot of vocabulary terms. It got a little bit messy, but we could have, had some norms again about what our expectations were of who was circling and when they're circling. But you can see that there's some really nice opportunities when we can share the screen. Again, if we have management of who's participating. So that's just like one example. You could also be sharing outside of a presentation. You could be sharing a PDF file that you're looking at. We saw how the student teacher was sharing with Seesaw. So, it really depends on what you want to share. And so I can point to specific things and highlight. So if I was reading with the kids and I was actually reading kind of along with them, then I could be highlighting it. The other option that I could do is I could give them a question to think about. So I just sent you a poll asking just, what is a dolphin? And this is just a quick informal assessment that we could have going as we're talking about what's on the screen. I'm going to end the poll. I can hit share results, and it should be available now for you. This is what it looks like for me. That is just like a sneak peek of some things we could do in Zoom. The other option too that we didn't talk about is the option to have breakout rooms. So a breakout room can be opened up and we can have participants split. So if we have kids and we're doing a guided reading lesson and we want them to work with a group on a specific story and talk about that story, or maybe we have different groups that are working on a math problem, we can actually split people into breakout rooms. So what I thought we could do is I would give you an option to go into a breakout center, and I'll give you 1 minute in the breakout room. So I'm just going to take my tools here and I'm going to split you up based on the participants that we have. There's an option, and it might not show up on your end because you are not the host of the session, but there should be an option if you hover on the menu where you can click breakout rooms. And you can decide when I've done it, it's popped up and it will show me how many people I want per room. So I can make the group as big or as small as I want to. I can decide if I just want 2 rooms. We have about 90 participants right now. So I'm going to break us out into 10 rooms. We're going to be split up into a group, a small group. And in that small group, I want you to talk about what are some ways that you think you might use Zoom with the students that you're working with. So if you're working with really young students or if you're working with older students, what are some things you think you could have the kids do with some of these tools we've talked about? And we'll see kind of what we come up with. And then after you have a few moments to chat about it, you should get something on your screen that tells you we're moving back into the main room. Now on my screen, it will also generate for me a list of who's going to what room. So I can actually toggle back and forth and visit the rooms. So I'm going to try to pop into your rooms while you're able to chat with each other. Welcome back, everybody. What was your experience in the breakout sessions? Anyone want to share kind of what it was like being able to break out into a smaller group?
I will say it was pretty cool because you taught us something new, and then we tested it out in the break room. So like we wanted to know, but it does work. You can save. You can do a whiteboard only if you're sharing. If you share your screen, then you're able to do a whiteboard. That I did not know.
So if I made maybe some co-hosts and then you were in the group together, someone would have that feature to share the whiteboard. Because I joined their group, and they were able to play on the whiteboard.
No, we can actually do our own actually now.
Yeah.
So when you left, we tested it out. So somebody actually went and shared their screen, and then they were able to do a whiteboard. So I tried it and someone else tried it, and so we're like, oh wow, okay, something new.
That's great. Thank you. And yes, somebody was asking about choosing who goes in what room, and it wouldn't show the screen for you of what on my screen. It had a list of all the participants, and I could decide what rooms they went in, or I could just have it automatically do it. And then on my screen, it also will have a breakdown of who's in what room, and I can join. And it takes about, I don't know, about 30 to 60 seconds for it to actually open up into another room. But then I could kind of pop in and say hi. And so you could see, like, if you had the kids that you were doing this with, it's really helpful if you have more than one adult to help you. Like if a student teacher takes a group and you take, a student teacher and a mentor teacher take a group, because otherwise, the kids are just on their own in the room and they could easily get off task.
Oh yeah. A while ago, before actually this Zoom meeting, I actually attended a RICA seminar from 6 to 7
Yes.
with Amanda Steinman. That's what she did. She actually broke us into groups of, I think, 10 breakout rooms. And
That's excellent.
She actually had us do PDFs. She had us do like whiteboards and everything. And we had to present the whole thing as soon as we get out of the break room thing. It was fun.
That is fun, and that's cool because you could see like how it could work when you're the learner. So from that perspective, there's a question in the chat. Is there a rule of 3 for students to participate online? Is that meaning for the breakout rooms?
Well, I was thinking, like, in some schools they say that you can't be the only adult with the children. So does that when you break them out, should there be 2 adults per room or a parent along with you in the room? How does that work out?
I mean, I would check with your school and your mentor teacher and what the policies are. I think it would be helpful if you had parents on the call too. That's a great suggestion. It's a good point. I'm glad you asked about that.
Thank you.
So we're going to switch gears just because time goes by so quickly, and we're going to take a look at Google Classroom. So I'm going to share my screen with you again. And the other just important disclaimer at the bottom of this slide about Zoom is just to remind you that with the kids, we don't really want to be on a call like we are right now, where it's a 2-hour session, because that's not appropriate for their attention span. We really want to keep it very short amount of time. Maybe 30 minutes at the most would probably be appropriate. And with younger students, maybe 15 minutes for a full kind of group activity. What's important is that we have some follow-up with them where they can do things, activities asynchronously at their own pace. Maybe you give them something to work on that you'll meet again later to discuss. That's when you can start pulling in small groups so they can get a little bit more individualized support. But we want to make sure that the time of our sessions aren't too long and that there's breaks. And so I also like to think about, Go Noodle and some of those other fun physical activities where you could get up and do some stretches together, or allow them to go, get a snack, show them as part of your norms that it's okay if they need to step away for a moment and do something, like if they need to use the restroom. So these are things that we don't think about as being important to discuss with the students as part of just the rituals and routines when we're in the online setting. Because we don't know if they have parents that are right there with them helping, or if they're on their own and their parents are working in the next room. I mean, it's just so hard to say. And that's why, you know, you want to make sure that you have kind of some expectations that are clear so that they all know that they can, you know, take care of themselves but still participate in the class. Okay, so we're moving into Google Classroom. Google Classroom has been around for a while, but they keep updating it and adding new features. And one of the best things about Google Classroom is that it's free. So you can sign up using a Google account, and usually you have to have a domain in your email address. So because we all are on the calstateteach.net domain, we are able to create a Google Classroom. You can run into some problems with it if you have students who are in a public school on their domain that you might not be able to access their classroom, and that's for security. And so the only workaround at this point for something like that is to see if it's possible in the school district that they can give you a temporary email address as if you were a substitute teacher, like a long-term sub, or if your mentor teacher was willing to allow you to share their information to log on. Another option is if they're having a live session through like a Google Meet, which is kind of like their version of Zoom, that maybe they could Zoom you in so you could share the screen with Zoom and you could at least see what's happening in the classroom. But that's intentionally designed to keep it so that it's only participants of that school or of that classroom. It's a safety feature. So when you're a teacher in your own classroom and you have an email address and all the students have email addresses, it's a lot easier than it is right now. But at least you'll get a sense of what it looks like, and maybe you'll have opportunities if your mentor teacher allows you to use theirs to be able to kind of create some assignments and post those assignments, or maybe you can still contribute to what goes up in the Google Classroom. So some benefits, we talked about the secure part because they do have to log in. It's also nice that because they are logged in, that you have access to send them emails, and you are able to connect parents and send parents emails through it. So it's like all one-stop shop of being able to communicate with the students. It's very user-friendly. There's so many learning management systems out there. And as you know, just from our program, we use Canvas as a learning management system. Some of them have more complicated features, and it can be harder to learn all the different odds and ends of how to add assignments and give feedback. But Google Classroom is very simple. It's designed to be pretty user-friendly. Now, there's some parts of it that you can go a little bit more advanced with, but for the most part, you know, it's a platform that kids can easily follow. What's nice about it is that it also integrates well with all the Google tools. So everything that you can create in your classroom can go into a Google Drive, documents and resources and presentations that you can then share with students, and you can have multiple classrooms set up where you can share them each year and kind of duplicate what you do, so you don't have to make a new classroom every time, but you can just copy what's in the class. You can have sections of a class. So that's a great feature. It also is just very collaborative because it has all the commenting and the sharing aspects that you can, you know, create team documents or partner documents and things where the students can actually add comments on one another's pieces and give each other some peer review. So yes, it does save everything to your Google Drive, and then you can also save things on your individual computer. You can post assignments, you can just share resources with students. So it can be used as like a formal classroom space, or it can be used as a supplement to things that you're doing in your real classroom. Let's say you weren't in online teaching, but you wanted to share some assignments that students could look at outside of the classroom as for homework, or just as some resources to help them prepare for something you're doing in class. That's a great way that you could use Google Classroom as well, just to have all the resources together in one spot. Some teachers use it like for their syllabus to have all the materials that are needed for the course. And then sometimes it's also used to post assignments and activities and ways that students can complete things that get turned in and that you can actually provide a grade on and feedback. So what's awesome about it is that you can get notified right away when an assignment's submitted, and you can actually add comments right away. So it's very similar to Canvas, where if you have the app, you can actually get a notification that your assignment was just graded, and you can go to it and you can see that feedback. Again, you can actually create multiple classes. So what's really cool is that you can really differentiate your instruction. If you have kids that are working on a project that's maybe an extension activity that's a little bit advanced challenge, then they could have their own classroom space where all the resources and materials are for that challenge. And then if you have kids that maybe need a little bit more practice with something, you could have another space where you have a bunch of extra videos and extra handouts and some activities through Google Slides or through Google Docs where the kids could go to that, and they don't all have to have access to it. You can actually differentiate who goes in what class and who gets access to what material. So it makes it really easy for you to have everything set up and then to be able to duplicate it and copy it for different groups of students. And that's what's really, really beneficial about it. So I want us to look at, I created a sample one for you to see what it looks like as a student when you log in. And you might already have played with it before, but this is just to get everybody on the same page with kind of what it's like to log into a class. And you go down to where it says classroom.
Right.
So you can join by putting in the code, which is this, you put this little plus sign, join a class.
Okay.
And the code is in my presentation. So let me go back and see. It is this OGAWWF4.
Oh, okay. OGW. Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And while you're joining, you should have access to this top piece where it has the stream. So it has some different activities that have been posted. So I have a pretend sample quiz that you can take. I have some resources that you can look through. So I'll give you, a few minutes to kind of navigate and see what it looks like. You can go directly to your classwork.
Yeah,
So
my little waffle didn't give me an opportunity to choose to join a class, or it didn't have classrooms, so that's why I chose a meeting. So maybe that's what it was doing too.
Oh,
It was
and
trying to get me into a meeting.
Yeah, sometimes you have to actually go down to more, even more.
Gotcha.
With
Okay.
all the apps to find
Okay.
it, more from G Suite if you haven't used it a lot. And then once you have it, it should show up there.
Yeah, they finally just got my login today, so I haven't had a chance to explore it all yet. So I'll do.
Yeah, and that's okay. We'll have the video available, and you'll be able to kind of tinker with it more.
Do we pick teacher or student?
So right now you're picking student, so you can see what it looks like as a student. So obviously this is the hardest part, is making sure you get all your students connected. But once you have them connected, then, they just join it. Like they get very used to how to join it, and it becomes second nature. So like if I go back a screen to my hamburger menu, I have actually a few classes. Can you see in my little menu? I have my cohort class. I have this shadow a student. So it shows me like these are the classes I'm teaching and these are the classes I'm enrolled in. The shadow a student is one of our module projects, so I can click and go to that class. And that there's a stream of people's comments, so it's kind of like used as almost like a discussion forum where you can have the students, you can actually post something and have people write on it. And then there's some assignments posted here, and they're really mostly posted as resources because they're not being submitted here. They're being submitted through Canvas. So I'm going to go back to our class. Oops, that's another class.
After they submit an assignment, can you get direct feedback on it for them?
Yes. So let's take a look. I'm going to go to, oh, somebody said hello. I see. Haley said hi in there. I see some comments here on our wall. Now I can go and I can delete stuff, or I can mute people if, if there's something posted here that I don't want to be on the wall. I'm going to go to classwork.
Can you also set it so that they can't post things on the wall too?
Yes, I gave you editing rights to be able to post and edit, and I can show you how to do that. So I'm looking at, there's 2 assignments that were posted so far. One was the what technology tools have you and your mentors used? And I'm clicking on it and it's displaying for me all the students that have access to it. So everybody right now, and we have Tiffany says that she's used Flipgrid, Zoom, Google Classroom, Canvas, and Clever. So I can reply. Now this was like a discussion forum one. So I can say a comment like, oops, my screen started going crazy. And that should pop up on her screen or on the main screen. Now I can go here and I can actually give a score. So I'm going to give Tiffany a score and I can return it to her. I can add a private comment. I don't know if you can see that menu that popped up. Thanks for being the first one to participate. Now, Tiffany, did you get any notification from me?
Sorry, yes, I did. It came through my email.
Okay, through your email. So yeah. That's great. We have documentation of grades and feedback that you can get direct to your email. I can actually click on all students just to save myself time, and all the people who've turned it in, I can click on just that group. And if I was looking for participation and just kind of skimming through, I can give feedback. I'm going to close off Tiffany's. I can look through and see if I was just doing this for participation. So I'm not really right now grading them on as something critical. I could give feedback to them this way. And then return it to all of them at once. So it's showing me who I have. It kind of gives me some warnings about making sure like somebody doesn't have a grade. Looks like Amy didn't have a grade.
Does that keep like a running tally of the grades too? Kind of like how like Aries and other programs do?
It should in the grade book. So I'm gonna hit return.
I had a question too. We use it for our students and they all have a Gmail account, but it isn't linked to an email. So how would they get feedback and all that information?
So they would either get it in the classroom,
okay.
Or they would in the app, in the mobile app, if they're on a mobile device. So let's see if you can go to your view of the grade book. I'm gonna go back out of here.
When I was doing my student teaching so far, my teacher actually did the same thing what you were doing right now, but the question was about email. They didn't have an email. It will show directly on their screen all the feedback.
The feedback.
Yeah,
like when did they log into the grades, right? Or did it pop up for them?
So if they have say they were working on a poem and then the teacher was correcting it or has some comment, they write on directly onto that sheet and they can respond like a message. But the only problem with the teacher was telling me about was that every time a student writes into to return that feedback back, they'll keep sending her emails. That's the only issue. So you have to tell your students not to write back a feedback to the teacher, or not. The teacher will get.
And I think you can change. Yeah, I think you can change the settings too, to where you don't get the emails.
Yeah. she got like 100 emails in one day because she forgot to, yeah,
Which
every
should be
single student
horrible.
sent back a message on the Google. I saw it and it was pretty cool, but I never knew you could do that.
Which is
So
that whole real time. You can
yeah, it
you
was
can
like a real
actually have a
time where,
conversation.
yep.
Let's see. I'm not sure. I forget where I went to play with the settings for that.
To have all of this done,
Yeah.
like you were saying earlier, you have to be, was it, you said like a teacher, right? To have all this accommodations, like all the, like that, like I guess the classroom in general, like all the material.
So you have to
Or
be, do you mean like in order to just have your own classroom, like Google
like
Classroom space?
yeah, like the program itself. Like one, I guess my question is like, say you are doing this, and then like say I'm just a student teacher, am I able to do the same thing, or no? Do we have to have like an official, like?
So you can make a classroom, but the kids won't be able to access it if they're not on the same domain. So that's where it runs. It will work better when you have like your own classroom and then the kids all have access to your own classroom. But if you're doing this with your mentor teacher, then they can either share their login, or if they can get you an email address on the domain, which some schools can do that really easily, and some of them are very strict about that. So you have to experiment. Some of my student teachers right now are just creating things that go up in the Google Classroom, and the mentor teacher is putting them up there, and then the mentor teacher shares what's available through Google Drive, and then the student teacher can go in and look at the work. So that's kind of the workaround that they have going on, which is not ideal, but it's still that way. It's all kind of in one place and you can both participate.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could we potentially set up our own classroom and invite, yeah, I guess we could. I think I did this once on a PD. You could invite other Cal State colleagues, Cal State teacher colleagues, to be students and then test it out.
Yes, exactly. And that's actually what I want you to do next. So you're in line with the next plan.
Okay.
So if you look kind of at the format of what it looks like as a student, it's just helpful to see how it's displayed. Now I can organize it in different categories with the resources. We can also have a shared calendar of all different activities or different meeting times. And then here's where they've now integrated. It used to be separate with Google Hangouts, but now it's all integrated, where if we set up a meet, it can happen through the classroom. And it's very similar to Zoom, where we would meet like this and have the camera on and we could share the screen. Let's see if there's anything we didn't talk about. Obviously, what's great too, if you haven't created a quiz before, I'm going to just show you and you'll play with that when you go in as a teacher. So you have options for what kinds of assignments that you want to create. So if it's a material, it has this little icon. It looks like it has a little bookmark. So I posted some Google Classroom resources here. So you can upload, I've got some videos, a PDF. I could add different sections for the resources. So I could have different topics. And then I also have some other types of materials. So I have a practice quiz that you can take. Has anyone taken it? Oh, it looks like 6 people took it. So when you create a quiz, you actually can create the questions and add pictures to it and make it, as many types of questions that you want with Google Forms. It doesn't even have to be a quiz. You could have a form where you're collecting information like a survey, or you're having, maybe learning about the kids a little bit more at the beginning of the year. So, but what's nice is it automatically will take all this information and put it into a spreadsheet for you. So you can set it up ahead of time where it does the grading, or you can go in there and you can add comments and make it a little bit more specific when you're grading. But that's just how it integrates the quiz feature with a Google form. So a Google form is just another app that you can use in the Google Suite where you can make quizzes and activities. So let's have you do that. That's the next piece, is to have you make your own classroom. So just like what we did where you went into the little menu, you can go to the waffle, to the logo, or you can go to classroom.google.com, and then you're going to click on create class this time and give your class a name. And you do want to do this with your calstayteach.net account, because we're going to share that so that I can log into your class too.
Is there something specific you want us to name it?
You get to have fun with it, whatever you want. So you can see when I go to my home page, I have classes that I'm in and classes where I'm a student. So it'll show you all of them on one screen, and then I can see whether or not it's something that I own or that I am enrolled in.
Is there like a like online how to do step by step to do all this? Like, because I've never used it, I'm a little bit kind of like blanked right now. I'm like, what am I supposed to do?
Me
so
too.
I was wondering if you have.
There's so
I'm
many
like,
online
I'm looking at
resources.
how do you do this again?
So many online
If we go
resources.
back to my presentation, if we go back to the previous slide, I do actually have hyperlinks here. This video walks you through step by step. So this is a really good video. In this classroom, which you will have access to, if you go to classwork, I had the resources, that folder. So I have several videos here actually about how to get started. There's some that are more in depth and some that are just like a quick overview. And then this, I definitely think this is a great resource, this PDF file. If you're more like hands-on with each step, it walks you through step by step. So that's actually the follow-up piece of this activity, is you're going to create a classroom. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You're just going to set up your classroom and maybe experiment with a activity of some sort that you post. So it could be a quiz, it could be an announcement. Now I see lots of people are sharing their codes. That code is actually going to go in our attendance form. So let me show you, because time is kind of starting to run out and you'll play with this a little bit more. Is you're going to share that code with me, and I'll be following up with you by looking at the classroom you've created to give you credit for participating. Attendance form is hyperlinked here. But I'm also going to show you on my screen in Google Classroom, I'm going to add the attendance form. So I'm going to go to classwork and I'm going to hit create. And I'm going to create an assignment. And now I'm going to call it attendance. When I go to add it, I have the option, I can add something that I already created in Google Drive. So it could be a PDF, it could be a presentation of some sort. It's open-ended, whatever kind of file. It could be a video that I'm adding here. I can give you a direct link, or I can upload the PDF or something that I want them to download. I could just embed a YouTube video. So these are some of my options. I could also just hit create and it will show me all the different Google tools. So I could create something from scratch. I'm going to go to add and I'm going to go to my Google Drive.
That's because I thought I broke the button for the drive.
And I have my attendance form, so I have it here, and I'm going to hit assign. And now it should pop up in the stream. And if you are able to go back into the class, you can get to it this way. So on this attendance form, you'll put the information that's already here about your name and who your faculty is. I've already provided the title and the presenter information, so it's just a quick drop down to select those. For the CE type, you're going to put the PD one, which is PD for Teacher Professional Development. And then here, this question, the code, that's where I see a bunch of codes in the Zoom chat. You'll copy those into here. So make sure that you fill this out, so that way it will generate for me all your information, because what will happen is you will be getting a certificate for participating today. And part of getting that certificate is that I'm going to be looking to see kind of that you tinker with your Google Classroom space. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just getting a class set up, maybe having one assignment of some sort that you create so that I can see that you've experimented. If you've done Google Classroom before, maybe do something you've never done just to make it challenging for yourself, or you can share an example of a classroom that you've already made. That's fine. Maybe you can add something to it unique. I'm leaving that open-ended. You have the opportunity to use your Google Classroom a little bit more with maybe your collaborative group. You can talk to your faculty about other ways you might be able to use your Google Classroom and earn some more CE hours. Maybe if you build up your classroom a little bit more, maybe if you're able to actually do something with your mentor teacher in Google Classroom. So those are some follow-up options, but that's up to you and your faculty, because you can explain to them that you have participated and we have a record of you participating. But the goal is for you to kind of explore. And I know we didn't go very in depth with it, but I try to provide some resources for you. So if you look on slide 17, Alice Keeler is an amazing, she's a coach she does a lot with Google tools, and her website she has a book all about Google Classroom. She has videos, she has tips and tricks, and she's amazing. So I would recommend looking at some of her stuff. Some of these links are some resources that are just directly from Google for how to navigate through Classroom. And then there's some other resources for just some ways that you can use Google Classroom creatively. So this is kind of a PD to get you excited about it and to get you thinking about ways you can use it with the students. And then the next step is for you to get a little bit more hands-on experience with it. So maybe looking at some of the videos that I've posted and kind of practicing with some of the features.
I have a quick question. So when do you plan on checking the Google Classroom to?
That's a great question. So I'm hoping to take a look at it within the next week, so that way I can go ahead and follow up and get your certificates to you quickly. So 1 week from today would be the aimed goal, to have a classroom created and at least one activity or assignment posted. Again, it doesn't have to be anything complicated. I just want to see that you've experimented. Hopefully you can experiment with it now and it doesn't take a lot of time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then I'm just gonna kind of stick around to answer questions while you play, or maybe you're at that point where your brain is overwhelmed. So we will have this recording available. And if you check the calendar, I will have a couple of series of PDs. So next week I have one, I believe next week is the one I'm doing about Google Slides and adding in different features to your Google Slides to make your presentations interactive. And then there'll be another one all about assessment tools, where we'll look at tools like Seesaw and Flipgrid and Padlet. I have one all about literacy tools and things that you can do for assessment with students. So hopefully I see you again. And thank you for coming tonight.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much. It was
I learned a lot.
Can I ask a
To hear
question?
that. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you change it from, and like if you create a classwork assignment, how do you change it from a draft to like a post?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me go to my classes. Look, your classes are already popping up. You invited me. So I'm going to go to the PD. And I'm going to classwork. Okay, so I go to create assignment. And then, let's see here. It should be right here where it has, you can assign it or save it as a draft.
Oh, so once you assign it, it'll,
saved as a, correct. And then you can also, like if it's a draft, it'll show up here. Like, do you see how my attendance says draft? And I can edit it. So I can click on it to edit it, and then I can actually assign it.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
I have another question. Can you change the name of the classroom at any point, or do you have to delete it and start over again?
You can change it. So I'm going to go back to my classes, and I'm going to go down to one of mine, and I just right click it and I can edit it.
Okay.
And here's where I can change the name of the class. You can actually also duplicate a class.
Okay.
So I can copy it and then I can change a little bit about it. So I could have kind of the framework. That's a really good trick for these is if you make one that's like your model class, then you can copy it and change it and add and take away things and make it like more custom. But then you don't have to keep creating it from scratch. So that's a really good feature. This down here shows me the folder that's automatically created for each class that I'm in with all the documents and resources. So this one is an empty class, so that didn't really show us anything. Let's go to the PD class.
This was super helpful.
I wish we could dive a little deeper. I feel like time goes by really fast, but hopefully at least it got you thinking about ways you might explore further.
Yes, definitely. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.